I'm Don with the Law Office of Don R. Dennis Jr. My office helps businesses that are involved in complex business deals. The issue is this: when you sign an agreement, are there adequate protections to help you in the event things don't go as planned? And do you comprehensively understand all the terms in the agreement? As an engineer, experienced attorney, and certified privacy professional, I've seen all types of agreements. My office's motto is engage diligence, because I believe clients have the right to a responsive attorney that has the same energy for them from the beginning until the end. If you're looking for an attorney that's going to fight for you and not with you on your matter, contact my office at 213-455-0880.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to the African Diaspora News channel. Before we begin, remember to like and subscribe, and to subscribe to the website, and to spread the word and support the platform. Spread it by word of mouth, share these broadcasts, and let everyone know about the true home of independent new black media. Now, there's a story that I need to bring you today about a terrible, heart-wrenching headline, really. And unfortunately, I've been covering this topic for a while, and I've seen many headlines like this. The headline we want to read about today is that 20 migrants have drowned off Libya's coast, off the coast of North Africa. Now, over the years, we've seen headlines about thousands of African migrants who have drowned in the Mediterranean Sea, attempting to make their way from Libya, from the African continent, to Europe, fleeing all kinds of persecution, all kinds of war situations, trying to make it to Europe. And you could almost say that African migrants coming from Libya, taking the Libya route, are in a way literally following the trail of wealth that was stolen from Africa and trying to make it to privileged Europe to some measure of safety. Now, there's a few things we can say about this situation. First of all, the real death toll of people that have drowned in the Mediterranean trying to make it from Africa is no doubt much, much higher. We hear every so often 20 migrants, 50 migrants, 100 migrants, 10 African migrants, whatever the number is, that drowned. But of course, the Mediterranean Sea has really become a mass graveyard of people fleeing the African continent, and we will never know the true numbers of people that drowned making the perilous crossing, much like we're never going to know the real number of those Africans that drowned and were thrown off board, and who died and who were murdered making the Middle Passage, being taken against their will across the Atlantic. We'll never know the tens of millions of people that died in the sea. We'll never know the numbers that make up the true reality of these graveyards. And now we see the case in the Mediterranean. And one thing we need to mention here is that there's been a push across Europe over the last few years to cut any of the search and rescue operations. Mare Nostrum in the Mediterranean, this was stopped, this was cut. So many of the search and rescue operations in the Mediterranean Sea were cut. So in other words, all of the privileged European nations that were built, financed, industrialized off African labor, off African resources, from African slavery, all of these countries have now cut the safety nets, the search and rescue operations that formerly operated in the Mediterranean. Of course, there are a few different NGOs that operate in the Mediterranean, and they go and they seek to find those making their way in rubber dinghies from the African continent, trying to get to some sort of safety in Europe. And these are human beings. You know, in the UK, you see all these demonizing headlines, really diminishing and removing the humanity of these people who have no other choice. Let's be clear about that. when you think the best choice for your family is to get into an inflatable dinghy, having sold your home and all your personal possessions to pay some criminal human traffickers to make it across the Mediterranean, when you feel that's the better choice for your kids and your loved ones, that shows you the measure of chaos you're leaving behind. When you feel the better option is to get into a boat where there's a 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever the percentage chance is that the boat might collapse, that you might drown, that because of the overcrowding on the boat might simply sink or might be abandoned by the people traffickers in charge. That shows you how perilous the situation is where you're leaving. And we have to mention the reality about Libya here, because, Libya was basically broken in half, and, the destruction Libya faced was because of the West. In 2011, there was a war waged by the United States and European powers, a primarily French-led operation, but also by the Americans, and they illegally destroyed Libya, brought it to a halt. They broke the state down and they murdered Gaddafi, who was the leader in Libya. And of course, Gaddafi was in power in Libya since 1969, when they kicked out the European powers and King Idris. And the Western racist media always talk about the problems in Libya. They lie as well, but they always emphasize the problems, but they will never talk about the fact that, for example, Libya, before its destruction in 2011, was one of the leading African nations regarding human rights. One of the leading African nations in terms of free housing, in terms of healthcare. The West hated Gaddafi because Gaddafi was an African Arab leader who was the first leader to apologize for the Arab slave trade, which lasted 1,250 years from the 7th century. Gaddafi apologized for this, and Gaddafi started to make inroads with other African nations. And Gaddafi wanted a united Africa. He wanted a united African currency, and he wanted to build with other leaders. And of course, this posed a massive threat to the West, and so Gaddafi had to go. Gaddafi never fled Libya. He fought in the trenches to the very end, despite other nations reaching out to Gaddafi and giving him the opportunity to leave the country. He remained in the country of his birth, and he stayed till the bitter end, and he never abandoned his people. There was a famous speech where Gaddafi actually warned the European Europe, and he even said, if you destroy Libya, you'll turn Europe black with migration. And what he meant by that was that if you break the stability, if you come and destroy Libya and break down, the infrastructure of this developed country, then you're going to have mass migration flooding in from Libya to Europe. And that's what you're seeing. And what you're seeing is Europe essentially slamming the door on these people that are making this perilous crossing. Europe has an obligation, not just to rescue these people, but Europe has, Europe would not be Europe as we know it without the human resources, without the human beings, without the rich resources they've stolen from the continent. There would be no Europe as we know it. But of course, this is always missing from the narrative. And now we see this headline: 20 more migrants have lost their lives drowning off the Libyan coast. And they're drowning because Europe has cut any of the search and rescue operations. They're drowning because these people should not have to flee the continent and Libya in the first place. But after the destruction of Libya and the European war of aggression against it, Libya went from being a developed country with developed infrastructure to a haven of people smuggling, people trafficking, a haven for terrorism. Western powers unleashed all sorts of terrorist forces in Libya. And actually, one of the things which happened immediately, again, to mention this point, Gaddafi apologized for the Arab slave trade and for the anti-black racism that had been there. And actually there was a town called Tourga, which was actually safeguarded by the country, if you like. And this was an all-black town in Libya, Tourga. And one of the first things that happened when Gaddafi was removed is that the anti-black sentiment, which has always been there, always been present, that was unleashed, and you literally saw horrendous images of black people dead and lynched and swinging from lampposts. As a result, the Western press tried to say these people were mercenaries. That was debunked and proved to be a lie. These black people were not mercenaries. They were just being strung up and hung because they are black. And now these people fleeing the continent and drowning are dying for no other reason than they are black, impoverished, living in war-torn situations, living in places where there's no human rights, living in places where there's no opportunities because of the pillaging of the continent by Europe. And now these people are being left to drown in mass graveyards in the Mediterranean Sea. And it's Europe's great shame. I believe in the future, future generations are going to look back at this chapter of Europe's history, and they will look back and see the great shame, the great crimes of these European countries, leaving people to drown in the Mediterranean, having decimated the continent. And then you got these fools like Nigel Farage rocking up to the English coast with binoculars and calling it an invasion when you have women and children and people with nothing but the clothes on their back, a few dozen here and there, coming to England, one of the most privileged countries in the world. They call it an invasion, and they whip up this racist sentiment in the UK. They call it an invasion, and they manage to get votes and political power because of it. So rest in peace to the 20 poor souls. If it was 20, maybe it was more than that, who knows. Rest in peace to all of those that have died making the perilous crossing from Libya. Shame on all the countries that have cut the search and rescue operations. Shame on those countries which were built off the wealth and resources and human beings from Africa and are trying to delete that history, trying to cancel that history. Shame on those countries that see no moral obligation to help these people. Shame on these countries which allow their media to demonize these people when the ones that should really be demonized are the leaders in power that are allowing this to happen and are pushing anti-black sentiment in the media through government policy, pushing anti-Muslim sentiment in the media and through government policy, playing to racist, white supremacist sentiment in the streets, playing to it so much that it's becoming political policy for vote winners. But yeah, just wanted to bring you that story. Rest in peace to those poor souls and to all of the Africans that are drowning in the Mediterranean, probably as we speak, every single day. Wanted to bring you that story. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. My name is Richard Sudan. This is the African Diaspora News channel. Thank you for your support as ever, and we will see you next time.
Are you tired of the rat race in America? Are you ready to visit the motherland to relax and rejuvenate? Are you ready to explore all that Africa has to offer? Then check out the brand new Diversified Game Academy course, Prepare for My First Trip to Africa. Are you worried about being able to afford the trip? We got you. We will show you how to travel either on a budget or as a baller. Learn how to stress the value of the USD. Did you know that 100 United States dollars is worth over 1,000 South African rand or 10,000 Kenyan shillings or 54,250 West African CFA? Are you worried about taking your kids? Get the game from Kellen Cash, a bona fide world traveler, having traveled to almost 20 countries, several of those in Africa. Get the game on taking your kids on their first trips. Learn how to find the best tickets, get the visas, and plan your own adventures in Africa. Don't let Eddie Murphy have all the fun. Plan your own coming to Africa trip starring you, produced by you, and featuring you. If you are ready for a life-changing experience, sign up for our course today, Diversified Game Academy. Get prepared and purchase at diversifiedgame.com.
Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the African Diaspora News Channel app in the Google Play and Apple App Store.